Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Ian Scott, and I am the managing partner of Scott Legal. Scott Legal is a full-service immigration firm, but we do focus on investor visas, and in particular, we have a focus on EB-5 investor visas, which we're going to talk about today. Today, we're going to talk about both EB5 direct investment and also EB5 regional center investment, and I'll describe what those mean. But before we get into the presentation, just a few housekeeping items. First, this presentation will be recorded, so we will have a video of the presentation that will be sent to you after. And the other thing that will be sent to you will be the PowerPoint presentation. We will send you a copy of that. And we also will send you a free EB5 guide. And the EB5 guide will have some of the information that we talked about during the presentation. We do have a number of different webinars, usually at least 2 per week. So if you do hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel, you'll be able to see other webinars. Even if you can't attend them, you will be able to, because they are all posted on YouTube, you will be able to receive the webinars once they have actually been recorded. And finally, the last thing that we will send you is a link where you can set up a consultation if you want to speak to a lawyer about your specific situation. And yeah, so without further ado, let us get started and talk about EB5. And if you do have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat or the Q&A. We will get to all questions, so please feel free to do that. So I started the presentation talking about regional center versus direct investment. So they both fall under the EB5 program. When we think of a regional center, we think of a much more passive investment. So someone who just wants to invest an amount of money, doesn't really want to be involved in the job creation, doesn't really want to be that involved in the day-to-day operations of the business. So that's what we're looking at for regional centers. And with regional centers, think of it as, like, for example, a company that wants to build a hotel and they are raising capital for that, and they are utilizing the EB5 program so that they can actually get investors to give them capital, but then they also the investors get the benefit of potentially getting a green card. But with this, there comes pretty high administration fees associated with investing in a regional center, and the returns are quite low. So when you take into account the administration fees, the returns may actually be negative. And this is an investment just like any other investment, investing in the stock market or any other investment, where you will get often you'll get limited partnership units, but they have the full risk of loss. You could lose your investment, and investing in these regional centers doesn't mean that you are guaranteed a green card. And then regional centers, one benefit is that they can count indirect jobs, whereas direct investments can only count direct jobs where the person's actually employed for the company, whereas you can extrapolate the economic benefit for a regional center and say that the fact that this hotel or other establishment is there, that's going to create jobs. And really, the people who are doing a regional center, they just want the green card, right? So they're not investing for a return or to have control, et cetera. Versus people who are looking at the direct investment, they really do want to have some control over the process, hiring, but they're going to be responsible for everything. They're going to be responsible for how the money is spent. They're going to be responsible for hiring employees. We talked about the direct jobs can only be counted. Another benefit of the direct program is that the program is not subject to reauthorization. So that was a big problem in 2021 because the regional center program didn't get reauthorized. So it delayed things just related to that program for some time. And again, the person who invests direct usually wants control of the process. And what we do see is a lot of people that, for example, started out on an E2 visa and then, invested and then continued to invest in the E2 business and then moving to a green card. So that is one way that we see people moving to a green card is going from E2 to EB5. But also we have situations where someone will just invest in a regional center, or someone will invest in a business or start their own business and invest the requisite amount of funds and apply for EB5. So the requirements for EB5 are listed on this slide. So let's go through them. The first requirement is that you have to invest money, and the money has to be at risk, and it has to be invested in what's called a new commercial enterprise. Now, a new commercial enterprise is not new in the sense that it doesn't have to be recently formed. It's an enterprise that's formed after 1990, but the amount that you invest is going to be either 800,000 or 1,050,000, and these are going to be indexed to inflation going forward. Now, the lower investment amount is going to be utilized when you are investing in what's called a targeted employment area. And a targeted employment area can be one of two things: an area where the unemployment rate is 1.5 times the national average. I think the unemployment rate now is around 3.7%. So 1.5 times that would be if you are in an area, if your business is going to be in an area where the unemployment rate is that amount, then you would only invest the 800,000, or you'd only be required to invest the 800,000. Or you're in a rural area, and that is going to be defined by the local jurisdiction. And the targeted employment areas now can only be defined by government. So, in terms of the investment that's included, it is a little bit more particular. The EB5 requirement is a little bit more particular, where certain things cannot be included. Like, for example, legal fees or administrative fees cannot be included in the investment amount. You can't have any investment amount that's paid back to the owner, or even probably the owner's family. So you do have to kind of go through, and some of the things that maybe were, able to be included for E2 wouldn't be able to be included for EB5. The investments can be made over time. So, we had one case where the applicant was an E2 visa holder, and the applicant made 5 different investments over a 5 or maybe even 10-year period. They had a farm, and then but you just have to track the investment and make sure that they're valid investment amounts, and that you can look at the source of funds and analyze the source of funds for those investments. So you can have multiple investments over time, and then once you reach the 800,000, then you can apply for the EB5. But when you're investing, the investment is investment, so you have to be personally in control of the funds and invest, versus retained earnings. So you can't kind of say, okay, well, I have a company, and let's say that your company earned $2 million one year, and that was in retained earnings, and then you say the next year you spent that, and then say, okay, now I'm eligible for EB5. It doesn't work that way. The money has to be in your personal possession and then reinvested in the company. There are a lot of differences between E2 and EB5. E2, the source of funds analysis is quite light. For EB5, it is quite extensive. The other big difference is that when you have an E2, you can actually purchase a business and give the money to the seller, and that's going to be valid for an E2. But for EB5, the money has to be invested in the business and linked to job creation. So very, very big difference there. And we talked about kind of other differences related to some of the expenditures that are eligible for E2 that are not eligible for EB5. So a lot of differences between E2 and EB5, but there are some similarities as well. The other big difference is E2 is country specific. So E2 is only treaty country nationals are eligible. So there are about 80 or so treaty countries, but EB5 doesn't have a country specific requirement related to it. The source of funds I mentioned already for EB5 is nothing like E2. So, you really have to show exactly where the money came from. And this is quite an extensive exercise, and it's not for the faint of heart. It really is quite an exercise that most people unfortunately are not prepared for, or they don't like, because it's quite intrusive. It's can be tax returns, it can be bank statements over an extended period of time, but the government is really interested in making sure that the money came from a legitimate source. And a loan investment isn't going to work for this. So the investment does have to be an equity investment, so it can be membership units, shares, it can be limited partnership units. So, but a loan is not going to work. The next big part of EB5, it relates to job creation. So you do have to create 10 full-time jobs, and that's not part-time jobs. And the jobs have to be created for U.S. citizens or green card holders. So that's something to keep in mind. So it's very important as you're going through this process to check the identification of the individuals to make sure that it's legitimate, because people can present you with false green cards, et cetera. And we do recommend that people utilize a system for recording the system for recording that is verified. It's called E-Verify, that the government can actually make sure that the jobs are real jobs. When you're doing an EB-5 and it's a new business, you do have to do a detailed business plan. And as I mentioned before, all of the expenditures do have to be linked to job creation. So if you're investing in a business and the business already has 3 or 4 employees, those employees aren't going to count because the money hadn't been invested yet. So the money that was invested does have to lead to job creation. So it would be jobs that were created after the money was invested. Now, the filing itself, we're going to file an I-526 petition, and the I-526 petition, if you're in the United States, one great thing now is that you can file the I-485 petition concurrently, provided the visa category is current. So if you're investing under the $800,000 model, then the visa category is current right now. It probably will be current for quite some time, regardless of which country you're coming from. But if you're investing under the larger amount, and the amount is the project is not a rural project or it's not an infrastructure project, then depending on where you're from, that could impact whether the visa category is current. So that's something, definitely speak to an immigration lawyer about. And if you're outside the US, you're going to be doing what's called consular processing. And then once you get the green card, 2 years after you get the green card, you have to apply for a removal of the conditions. And the removal of conditions is filing an I-829 petition. And once that is filed, because when you get the green card initially, you're going to get the green card for 2 years, and then the I-829 petition, you're going to show the government that you actually were able to create U.S. jobs. So the program went through a number of different changes, but I think the key things to keep in mind here are the investment amount changes. So the 800,000 and 1,050,000. Then the last part of the slide deals with the set-asides. Now, the set-asides are very important because they make it such that you are going to be able to possibly invest the $800,000 amount, and regardless of which country you're from, you are going to be able to file the I-485 petition at the same time. So that's and that's going to be because they set aside 20%, 10%, and 2% of the visas for these categories: rural areas, high unemployment, and infrastructure projects. So it's something quite beneficial for new investors, because this is only people who invested after March of 2022, but something to keep in mind if you're eligible for it. And I mentioned already that you are eligible to file the I-485 petition, which as long as the visa category is current. And this can be very beneficial because you can file work and travel authorization at the same time. So, you really could stay in the United States until the I-526 has been adjudicated, and the I-526 is taking 4 to 5 years to be adjudicated. So it's definitely beneficial, because before March of 2022, you weren't able to file the I-485 concurrently. You had to wait till the I-526 had been approved. So that's a big change. Another big change was the administration fees. You do have to prove where you got the money from for these, but you don't have to. You cannot include them in the investment. You can't use the money for that. Gifts and loans are fine. If you do get a gift or loan, you have to show where that money came from. And then there is another provision that it helps a little bit with people who invested and then something beyond their control happened, such that they lost their investment. So other things to consider when you're looking at EB-5, if you do start a business, you can't just kind of put money, 800,000 in a bank account and then just apply. You do have to spend some of the money or have commitments. If you do have a gift, then you make sure you pay gift tax in your relative jurisdiction, because that can come back to haunt you if you don't. If you have a loan, you have to make the loan payments during that period. So if they take 4 to 5 years to adjudicate, the petition, then you want to make sure you're making those loan payments. And then we talked about already the considerations for purchasing a business. You can't purchase a business. Well, if you purchase a business for EB5, then you have to then go back and you have to then go back and invest additional money into the business. The purchase price, if you give that to the seller, is not going to count. And there's no percentage ownership that you're required for EB5. That's another big difference from E2. And the other thing you can't guarantee, you can't have any kind of type of guaranteed return on investment. So that's something, the money does have to be, there does have to be a risk of loss associated with it. When you're moving from an E2 to an EB5, we talked about these differences, I think, already. So we won't go through those again. Okay, so let's take a look at this example. So let's say, there's Helen, she has an E2 visa in 2015, and let's say that she purchased a business for $300,000, and then the business had 5 full-time employees, and she paid lawyers $40,000 in legal fees. And then so at the end of 2019, she took another $500,000 that was given to her as a gift, and the person who gave the gift inherited the money for property that they inherited a while ago. Instead of giving the money to Helen, they deposited the money directly into Helen's business bank account. When the money was invested, the $500,000, there were 10 full-time employees at that time. So she's hired 5 since she bought the company. At the end of 2019, she paid herself a bonus of $100,000, right? So that's something we're going to talk about. After the company made $1 million. On January 1st, she applied for EB5 and saying that she's invested $1.8 million, the $300,000 initially, the $500,000 plus the $1 million that the company made. And then she wants an EB5, and she also included information that she created 10 full-time jobs. So let's go through what the issues are here. So the first issue is that for E2, buying the business for $300,000 is fine, but it's not fine for EB5. So that $300,000 doesn't count. So the business itself is fine. So you can say that business, the business, if she invests more money in the business, that's fine. So the additional $500,000 that she invested in the business, that's going to count, but it doesn't bring her to the $800,000. The other thing that doesn't count is the $1 million that the business made, unless she pays herself that as a salary, pays taxes on it, and then reinvests it. So the other thing that she can't use the money that she invested, the $500,000, for the legal fees. That can't be used. And the source of funds, because she got the money as a gift, the $500,000, she does have to. It doesn't matter that the money came from inheritance 15 years ago. The government is going to want documentation related to how that person got the money. Now, the other thing is the employees. If she the starting date of when you can start to count employees is once the money's invested. So we have $500,000 invested. And since the $500,000 was invested, she only had hired 5 employees. So that's all that can count towards EB5 for right now. And then the other big thing to keep in mind is the bonus that she paid herself. If that $100,000 came out of the invested money, that's a big problem for EB5. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So timing considerations, EB5 petitions really do take a significant amount of time to be adjudicated. The I-526 is taking 4 to 5 years. The I-829 is also taking over 5 years to be adjudicated. And you do have to kind of keep in mind the country-specific quotas. If you're investing under the $800,000 rubric, then that for right now is current. And then, if you're in the United States, now you have the ability to file the I-485. If the category is current, so you may have a basis to stay and even work in the United States, but if not, you have to consider that as well. And then dual intent considerations. If you're on some other visa, like if you're on TN visa or some other visa, you do have to make sure you're looking at the dual intent considerations. And sometimes it is a good idea to have parallel green card strategies. We have people who are doing national interest waiver petitions, but at the same time doing EB5. So kind of hedging their bets, as it were. And planning is really the key here. So that is it for the prepared remarks. And we do have a question. How do we check if our NC or JCE is in a TA? What are the reliable sources that USCIS will accept? So this is one of the, I guess, problems with USCIS changing this model. There are some kind of TA calculators out there that regional centers offer, so you can use one of those, but it's going to be up to USCIS ultimately. So if you're submitting a petition, I would rely on the calculator, but then I would also get kind of census data from where the project is located and submit that with the application as well. Because if you're relying on employment numbers, then that's going to be quite persuasive if you have employment data that indicates that the unemployment rate is 1.5 times the national average. And that is it for the questions. So as I said, we will send out a copy of the presentation, a copy of the video of the presentation, the guide, and a link to set up a consultation with us to go through any specific EB5 questions that you have. Okay, so we do have one more question. If I invest in direct $1 million and once approved EAD, then I invest EB4 provisional green card, does that work? I'm the way that the question's written, I'm not sure I fully understand it. Okay. So no. So you have to invest in order to apply for the EB5, you have to invest the 800,000 or the 1,050,000. You can't invest a lower amount and then apply. That's another kind of change that was made in March. Before you could do some kind of promissory note arrangement, but that does not work anymore. So in order to apply, you do have to invest the full 800,000 or 1,050,000 before you before. Excellent. Sounds good. Okay. Thank you very much. And again, reach out to us if you need any assistance with EB5. Thank you. Bye-bye.